Hello, friends, and welcome to Conversations with Consequences. We are the radio show and podcast of the Catholic Association, where we aim to change the culture one conversation at a time. You can listen to Conversations with Consequences on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. We are also on Sirius XM Channel 130. Of course, our radio show is always a podcast. Go to thecatholicassociation.org/podcasts or directly to wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you for joining us again this week on Conversations, and thank you for being our loyal listeners. It's wonderful to know that people keep coming back to listen because these conversations are having consequences, good consequences for yourselves and all your families and all your wonderful apostolic work that you do out there in the world with the people who are close to you and not so close and sometimes far away. So thank you for being with us. Today, I've invited Pablo K. He's the editor-in-chief at Angelus News. He's been on the show before. He is my editor at Angelus News, and Angelus News is the magazine of the largest diocese in the United States, which is that of Los Angeles. Los Angeles has this huge, bustling archdiocese where they speak like 60 different languages at their masses, and Angelus is a wonderful publication that I am always so happy to write for. And I do a lot of political writing where I have to be very dry and factual, and I do some cultural things that are sort of complicated topics that are hard sometimes to delve into. And then for Angelus, I get to write about my family. I get to write about my faith, my relationships, and recently I even wrote a poem, and I'd never written a poem before. Not really. And Pablo was kind enough to publish it, and I received a prize for poetry from the Catholic Media Association, which had their award ceremony a couple of weeks ago. And we're going to talk to Pablo about this because at Angelus, like every year, they received many awards. Welcome to the show, Pablo.
Thank you, Gracie. It's great to be with you.
Pablo, you and I have been working together for several years now, and it's been a fabulous partnership from my end. I hope also from your end. But it's wonderful being a part of the Angelus project. I talk about it a lot on the show because it's one of the happiest parts of my professional life is my association with Angelus. You're a big part of that, obviously, being the editor. Tell me, do all your writers feel the same way?
That's a good question. Not all of them have radio shows that have me on to tell me that, but I'd like to think so.
Well, I'll tell you why I feel that way, because Angelus is a place where there's real truth and honesty in the pages of Angelus and real heart as well. I think that there, in general, in media, there are very few places that one can be truly, I don't want to say be oneself, but that's, I guess that's the trite phrase for it. One can be truly, one can show all of one's depth, even one's spiritual depths, which I think most of us keep under wraps most of the time, whatever our professional associations are, or whatever we do professionally, we tend to keep that part of ourselves under wraps. And at Angelus, that's not necessary. So that's what makes me feel wonderful about Angelus.
Oh, well, thank you. I think that, one of the most important parts of Christianity, of our faith, is being real, right? Is, Christianity, contrary to I think how some people may live it, is not to put on some kind of show or some kind of facade of goodness or a way of acting around other people or writing in a certain way and not in another. I think, there's a certain honesty and sincerity that I see as necessary in my prayer life, but it's also necessary in how we communicate, right? Mm-hmm. And to see, where is it that God calls us? Does He call us when we're doing really great and we've accomplished things and we've no, the experience of every Christian, of every saint, is that God calls us in our sin, in our misery, in our failures, in our So I've always found in my 6 years of this magazine, that kind of sincerity, that kind of openness, refreshing. And I think I think I hope our readers also find it to be refreshing.
I want to use another horrible trite modern term, which is safe space. And I hate that term, the way it's used out there, but there's something very safe about our faith, in the sense of what you were saying, right? Like, we're not people who find themselves Christian and in Christian circles and Catholic circles. There's a safety there because there is a sense that's very deep in our bones that all of us are dysfunctional inside. All of us are weak. All of us have failings, and yet there's this mercy that covers everything, and we're able to be honest, with each other without having to put on airs, as you just said. We don't have to put on airs with each other. We know that we are just sons and daughters of God trying to make our way back home.
Right, and also I think that reminds me of the poem you just read, right? That got that second place award from the Catholic Media Association last month, right? This elegy to a child lost through abortion, which one of the things that struck me was it channeled King David, right? And King David was a figure in the Bible, in a sense, one of the most terrible sinners we find in the Bible, but yet a just man who came to understand and accept the consequences of his sins. That's refreshing. That is real. That is so I think that's that speaks volumes. I think also the award you received for this, and as well as the second place award you also received for your column, which I was afraid you weren't going to mention in this interview, but you deserve all the credit for it. Speaks to I think there's a hunger or a thirst or whatever you want to call it for realness. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes in Catholic media we either get drawn into the some of the partisan political divisions or into some of the abstract theological debates or liturgical preferences, or things that really after a while can risk becoming really silly when the battle we all face as Christians, as Catholics, is much more serious.
And also, we're all fighting the identical battle, right? I mean, we can allow ourselves to fall into factions and into our own little private our private preferences, right? Our little preferential groups. But the truth is, we're all fighting the same battle, and we should all be comrades in arms in that sense. And I think that that's something that Angelus does. Angelus, I mean, it's the magazine of the Archdiocese of LA, which obviously is a very diverse place with lots of different points of view, even within the Catholic community. And yet Angelus is able to, I think, stay in that common faith that we all share, even with the tendencies that we have now to fall apart into little sections within Catholicism.
Oh, that's exactly it. I mean, really, as the editor, I do my best, and I know my editorial team shares the same goal, is to make a publication and a news platform for everybody, in a sense that everybody in our archdiocese and also beyond, our readership has really become more national now. That there's something for everybody, and everybody is being here in LA runs a very wide spectrum, right? As you say, we're a very diverse community of faith. We're the biggest archdiocese in the country, really a diocese built by immigrants. And not so and more recent immigrants, really, just in the last 100 years for the most part. So I really think that's what it is to be Catholic, right? To be universal. And
Exactly.
and the church, that's the church's mission to reach everybody. So
tell me about some of the other writers that write for Angelus. Well, you don't have to tell me. Tell our listeners about some of the wonderful writers that grace the pages of Angelus.
Well, I do have to give, I guess the first ones that come to mind would be the other two columnists that you share a space with, Heather King and Greg Erlandson, who, like you, have been writing for Angelus for years and have become mainstays, and we're also honored for their regular columns in the CMA Awards. And then, of course, we have exclusive Vatican coverage from the team at Crux, led by John Allen, who was also honored and included in this year's Catholic Media Association Awards. Another one of the interesting contributors that I was happy to see got some credit was Elise Urenic, who wrote a couple of really interesting essays that were awarded. One of them was a reflection after the death of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI on what she called the Benedict XVI generation, which I would say I feel I also belong to, right? We were the generation that grew up going to the World Youth Days with him in Cologne, Germany, in Sydney, Australia, in Madrid. And Elise really wrote a beautiful reflection on what it meant, what Benedict XVI meant to her. There's the old saying that people used to go to see, the crowds used to go see John Paul II, but they went to listen to Benedict XVI. And that certainly rang true for me as somebody who went through all three of those World Youth Days and also made a pilgrimage to New York and Washington when he visited the States in 2008, and how really this humble scholar who didn't, in many ways wasn't expected to do much as Pope. He was elected also like Pope Francis in his late 70s. But how this man's example, his deepness, his, I would say even his spirit, touched our lives, and we're seeing the fruits now. You can see, at least here in the United States, the kind of spike in vocations to the priesthood that many credit to his outreach, to his pontificate. I
feel Pope Benedict, he had an answer to a question that was bugging the entire West, which was the question of relativism, and he had formulated that answer before his papacy. And I think maybe I'm putting words into other people's heads, but this is what I experienced about Pope Benedict that I feel was so important. There was this yawning problem that we had, right? Which was the problem of relativism and the dictatorship of relativism that he has, as he called it. We were experiencing that and not really understanding it for what it was. That's how I.
I think that's exactly right. We needed, my generation especially needed a rational answer to postmodernism,
exactly,
to the secular culture that and I'm reading a book about the 90s right now by this guy named Chuck Klosterman, and he said the thing about the 90s was nobody really cared about anything. The internet wasn't fully developed, so whether something was true or false, well, you didn't really have Google to look it up. And but then the 2000s came around, and all of a sudden we're confronted with aggressive ideologies, the dawn of a national security apparatus responding to Islamic terrorism and other threats, climate change, all these things. And really, I think the timing, in a sense, was providential for this kind of Pope. So anyways, Elise had a beautiful reflection on that. She also did a really deep but amusing but also very serious reflection on this trad wife.
Yes, that was a
phenomenon,
fabulous piece. Yes.
which I won't go into. I can't consider myself an expert in that field, but I was happy to see it. I was happy to see it honored in these awards.
Yes, but you were honored too, Pablo, as editor, and this is not the first. This is not the first time.
Well, I got honorable mention in Editor of the Year, and that's more than I deserve. So I'll take it.
Okay, but I think it was fourth. I believe it was the fourth year of in the row. Was it not?
It might have been. I don't know. I'll have to look it up.
And also something else in honor dedication to serving audiences in 2 languages, and I think that's very, very admirable. I mean, I'm a Hispanic, so I think that's very admirable. But it's wonderful that Angeles is also in Spanish.
Thank you.
Especially the church is so Hispanic, right? I keep going everywhere I go. I've been traveling a lot recently for different reasons, but every time I always go to Mass every day, no matter where I am. And it doesn't matter where I am. I find myself surrounded by Hispanics because that's who's going to church, and in many cases across the United States. And many of them don't speak English. And it would be a shame if the church didn't throw her arms, and the American church didn't throw her arms around her Hispanic sons and daughters, right, in the United States. But the church is doing that, and I think I know Angeles is a part of that.
Well, thank you. I think we can always do a better job, and I think one thing that has really stuck out to me in the last few months, going to a few different conferences and meetings and talking, is we can't treat the church can't treat the Latino community as a monolith, right? And I'm seeing that, right? The Spanish-speaking audiences in LA can differ vastly from the one in Miami,
of course,
or in Laredo, Texas, or in Detroit, Michigan, right? They come from different countries, different levels of formation, of education, literacy, interests. So I think that's something I'd like to see in the church leadership here in the United States. I think they should take that in mind a bit more seriously.
So do you see the church? Do you see the church in moving in that direction? I know that you're not just an editor. You're very involved in the church writ large and in other ways. Do you see the church moving in that positive direction?
I'm not sure. Here in the United States, I think after a while, there's a temptation, I think, to start using the same expressions and even the same ideas over and over again. But where are they going? I ask myself that, and I don't have an answer. But we talk a lot about walking together, and listening, and all that's well and good, and a lot of it is inspired by the really pastoral approach that Pope Francis encourages to evangelization. But here in the United States, and I think everywhere, right, we have to start with the good news. And the good news isn't something abstract, right? The good news goes back to the fact that I'm a lousy sinner, and Christ has thought of me and has called me and has forgiven me and has opened me a way for me to come back to him. Mm-hmm. And God has called us all, I think, in those circumstances, whether we're immigrants, whether whether we've been here for forever, whether we're poor, whether we're rich. So I think when it comes to this, is the language that everyone understands, mm-hmm. that everyone can understand, whether you're a Latino, whether you're
back to universality, right? The universality of the church's message. There's only one message, no matter who's listening, whose ears are listening. It's always the same message, as you say.
Exactly.
And do you think, I know that tomorrow or tonight, I'm not sure when, but you're heading to the National Eucharistic Congress. That's going to be one big message for everybody who has collected there from all over the United States. What are you looking forward to in the Eucharistic Congress, and what do you think is the main message?
I'm looking forward to seeing God alive, which is the Eucharist, right? God takes our nature, right, and becomes one with us. And what happens when that happens, right? What are the consequences? That's what I'm really looking forward to in this revival, because in this Congress, right? Because as we said before, there's a hunger, there's a need for God, for meaning in our lives. I think this is what, we were talking about Pope Benedict before. This is what he understood. And so I'm really just looking forward to listening to people, to hearing their stories, especially the ones who have been on pilgrimage the last couple of months, the ones who have come from far away, the ones who have endured difficulties. I'm looking forward tomorrow to seeing a friend from rural Indiana who has been, he's in his 70s, dealing with a lot of health issues. And just a few days ago, I found out there was one open space, thanks to a woman who canceled from health issues, on a bus at a parish 30 miles away. And so he's driving down there on Thursday. He has no idea what the schedule, the itinerary is. And if it weren't for this, but he's going. And I know that, pilgrimage is important. Pilgrimage, even if it's just one day, but the act of going on pilgrimage, I think, is essential. I've experienced it this year, and thankfully, throughout my life. I need to get out of my comfort, I need to move. And I need to move to meet Jesus Christ. So I'm a witness that wonderful things happen when you do that, right? I remember a homily a couple of years ago. I was in Brooklyn and at a mass with Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio, who's since retired, and he was saying that, back in the Middle Ages, Christians really had two fundamental ways of encountering God, right? One of them was through art, right? At a time when most people didn't know how to read, the word of God wasn't really available, and through pilgrimages. And pilgrimages were serious. Pilgrimages, whether you went to Santiago, Spain, or to the Holy Land, it was a once in a lifetime thing. Yes. And you left, and you didn't know if you were coming back. And
you'd be gone for months, alive. At least.
And you would sell all of your possessions if you had to make your way. It was like an eschatological act almost. And so I didn't have to do that this year, but it does show the seriousness and also the beauty of what it means to be a pilgrim, right? That every pilgrimage is a reminder that we're pilgrims on this earth. We're not going to be here for long. This isn't our destination. We're just passing through.
And we're not supposed to be comfortable on the way to our goal, right? I think there's a lot of comfort seeking in all of our lives, and going on pilgrimage reminds you that exactly that the pilgrimage of our lives is arduous. It's supposed to be arduous.
Exactly. And in the other thing about pilgrimages is that they never go as planned. Things happen. Surprises happen. Detours. A bus breaks down. You sprain your ankle. The bus doesn't show up. I don't know. Yeah, that's always been my experience in pilgrimages. But those are all the opportunities we get to see God appear, to see that God is the one guiding us, that is moving us, that He appears when there seems to be no solution, that He's the one that's getting us to our destination.
Yeah, and he's in the material of our daily lives, the little obstacles, the annoyances, the unpleasant boss, the right, everything that happens to us. God is there. God is in the happening, and that's
Absolutely.
that's the pilgrimage. Even the parts that are completely go against our beautiful plans. We wake up every morning with such wonderful plans, don't we, Pablo?
We do. No one can beat my plans. Come on.
And then God decides. Then God sends us little obstacles so that we can grow as we climb over them. Pablo, our time is up. I want to thank you for being such a wonderful editor at Angelus News, and I want to recommend it to all our listeners. It's online. Give us the online address, would you?
AngelusNews.com.
AngelusNews.com. And
you can also there sign up for our free daily newsletter, which actually won first place at best newsletter. Always Forward.
Oh, that's a great newsletter, and it gives you the things you need to know from a Catholic perspective, for sure.
So I encourage you all, AngelusNews.com.
And also the paper subscription. It's a wonderful magazine. I always leave a few copies around on my coffee table, and everyone who comes to my house opens one and starts to read. And it's a wonderful gift.
And you can subscribe there for $19.95 a year. It's we have a special offer going on right now, so take advantage of it. And if you're going to the Eucharistic Congress, maybe past, but we'll also have some gift subscriptions available there at our booth.
Wonderful, Pablo. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful spiritual pilgrimage at the National Eucharistic Congress.
Thanks so much, Gracie. I really appreciate you having me on.
Welcome back to Conversations with Consequences. I'm your hostess, Dr. Gracie Christie, and joining us now for this next segment is Father Jason Charron. He's a Ukrainian Catholic pastor who gave the benediction ahead of President Trump's rally this past Saturday, at which the assassination attempt happened and at which that very sad death of one of the rally attendees took place. We are happy to have Father Charron on to give us his insight, especially his spiritual insight at this very difficult time in our nation's history when this kind of political violence is possible. Things that we are not used to seeing and haven't seen in a very long time in our country. Welcome to the show, Father Jason.
Glad to be here. Glory to God.
Yes, and more glad, I'm sure, than ever after what I think everybody that was at the rally must have felt was a close call. And unfortunately, one of the rally attendees didn't make it. I'm very sad about the poor man that must have died in your presence, I think, Father.
No, I had moved away from there before Mr. Trump began speaking, and so I was not at that exact spot where the man died.
That must have been very shocking for everyone around him. Very sad. Father, you were put by God into a very important place, I think, in history, right? In a time in our country where division and faction has grown out of proportion, leading to something so ugly as an attempted assassination and the death of an innocent bystander. How do you feel that you were placed by God in that position? What part were you playing in this drama?
Well, thank you for the question. I think the part I was playing is simply being a conduit for God's grace. There has, elements in the picture, and my element was simply to be there and to say the words of invocation and ask God to send His grace upon us. We have a foundation, and I thought that was why I was called, to be the one to give the opening benediction. And the foundation is the holy protection of the Mother of God. It's devoted to promoting Mary's role as a protectress and unifier in our country.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, so that theme of protection, I didn't know it, but through the prayer that day and the work of the shrine that I'm trying to build, maybe that was God's will that I be there that day. That it remind people and Mr. Trump of the role that God plays in the affairs of men by protecting us from unseen evil forces that seek to destroy us, and not only us individually, but our nation as a whole.
Can I read a small section of your invocation that I found very moving?
Yes.
You said, my prayer there was for the restoration of right relationships in our society, relationships at the individual level, at the familial level, at the societal level, such that our nation would be made great again in God's sight, and our nation be made great again, I said, that our world be made great again in God's sight.
Amen.
Well, this is these words, they go straight to my heart, because I mean I'm a child of immigrants. I grew up mostly outside the United States, and I experienced the United States as a great nation. And I think many people, sadly, in the last few decades, have stopped thinking of our beautiful country in those ways, in that way, the shining city on the hill, which I get goosebumps when I say that phrase, and I feel that your invocation points us in that direction again.
Yes, and unfortunately, it's taken the loss of a man's life, and it's injured at least 3 people. But it at the same time it took the loss of Christ's life on Good Friday to really wake people up, and only through tragedy can the brittle exterior of men's hearts be broken open. And I think through the tragedy of the loss of that one man's life, that heroic man, and the injury sustained by the 2 others and by Mr. Trump, just may be the tragedy our nation needs for its crusty, hardened heart to soften, and to allow this nation to become a vehicle of goodness in our world that is so overcome with acrimony and death and division, destruction. And I believe through the grace of God of this day that our nation can be reborn as one nation under God.
You mentioned the heroic action of the poor man who was killed, and I've read that he protected his daughters with his own body. And
he did.
That is the kind of Christian self-sacrifice that should characterize everybody's life, correct?
It absolutely is. And I tell people that they may not like President Trump. They may not want to be like President Trump. But on that day, we were all given an example at that Trump rally of a man that we all should aspire to be like. Mm-hmm. And that was that brave man who laid his life down for others, his 2 daughters.
I also noticed, and I read that Mr. Trump, a couple days later at the convention, he ripped up the speech that he was going to give, and he gave a speech, I think, focusing on the kinds of things that you and I are talking about.
Yeah, I've been so busy. I didn't listen to the speech that he gave, and we need to see each other as brothers and sisters, and not as enemies. And that's the key thing here, is we're brothers and sisters. And unfortunately, it's taken the loss of the life of this man, Corey Comparatore, to teach us that lesson. And I hope Mr. Trump can capitalize on the opportunity when he gives a speech tomorrow, Thursday, at the convention, to deliver a message of forgiveness, of unity, of magnanimity, and the role God plays in guiding our affairs.
Father Jason, how do you think exactly that Our Lady can help us to make of our country what it promised to be since its inception?
She can help us because prayer affects the one who prays. And if we are praying to Mary as protectress, we become as she was, and we acquire her attributes. That of we become, as a nation, as a society, more maternal, and that's what we need. Because right now, the uterus, the birth canal, is a war zone, and that's not what our nation needs. It's not what children need. They need a maternal nation, a maternal society that is receptive to life. And the nation also, I think, needs this devotion to Mary as protectress, because we're a land of vulnerability, of children who are vulnerable, and because life has become so cheapened, so disregarded, that we all seek that protection, and that's the title that has been neglected of Mary as the protectress of the Christian people. So that's how she can help us, by instilling in the hearts of the sons and daughters of this nation a sense of protection and maternal power.
I'm really glad that you draw that connection with the way that our country for so long has had this abortion stain on it, right? And that colors everything. It colors the way that we treat each other. It elevates the level of violence and lack of dignity, and the thought that if you disagree with somebody, or if you think that they don't have the same political ideas as you, that you can pick up a rifle and shoot them. I mean, I think it comes straight. It's very deeply tied to this lack of respect for life when life is very vulnerable and very innocent inside the womb. Do you agree, Father?
Yeah, I do. I think, all these people who want to stop wars, I commend them. And all these people who want to stop assassination attempts, who want to stop school shootings, who want to stop carjackings, all these people who want to stop violence are in the right vein, but they need to start in the womb. Mm-hmm. Violence in our society is simply the afterbirth of violence in the womb. We have cheapened human life from the very beginning, and children are growing up. This is now the third generation growing up knowing that human life is dispensable at its most vulnerable phase, and therefore to take a gun to eliminate one's opponent is not a big stretch. So we need, in fact, we must recoup that sense of the sacred and be born again as a nation of believers in God, the author of life.
I like very much how you connect it also to Our Lady as protectress, because obviously that maternity of Our Lady was incapable of violating that deep connection between her and her unborn child, who happened to be the Lord. But every woman who carries a baby has that same divine connection with her child that Our Lady had with the Lord, right? Yes. And to be able to reconnect to that gorgeous maternity of Our Lady, and somehow infuse it into our culture that has been so degraded by abortion is something certainly to pray for.
Yeah. Well, please tell people holyprotectionshrine.org, and we're going to try and instill that sense of motherly love and protection over the sons and daughters of this land. I have to go.
Thank you so much, Father. It's very kind of you to join us, and I hope that our listeners will go to holyprotectionshrine.org and learn more about this wonderful project of yours.
Thank you. God bless.
Before Father Landry's homily this week, I just wanted to share the poem I wrote for Angelus. So I'm going to read this prose poem that I wrote to share with you. It's about it's about what I have learned from working with women and also men who have experienced the trauma of abortion. This is this prose poem, and it goes like this. It's an old grief, a dirty, draggled bird that perches in a corner of my mind. It keeps quiet mostly, though his silence is heavy, a brooding silence that I can almost touch. Once in a while, less often, thankfully, than before, he calls the guilt that only I can hear. I halt, whatever I am doing, and listen. I'm glad when the sound fades. I'm not complaining. There were years when the nasty beast sat on my shoulder, peering balefully at the doings of my life. I would feed him bits of myself, the bits that seemed to belong to him by rights. It was wrong of me to do this. I know it now, although I certainly knew it then. Hadn't I read the word mercy written on countless pages and in many languages? Hadn't I known since childhood of the forgiving flood that poured over the world, first on the torture rock of Golgotha above the city, and ever since ceaselessly repeating on sacrificial altars everywhere? I went seeking mercy, yes, and sounded out the litanies, soothed by their insistent rhythms. I assented eagerly and hopefully. I believe, help my unbelief. In curtained tiny alcoves I knelt, waiting for the bath of grace. It flowed through the pierced veil from dimly seen lips, warm with the breath of man. Eo te absolvo. But my dingy feathered tormentor waited just outside the sanctuary, cawing, knowing my hope would wilt in the hot sun. What did he cry in his cracked, evil voice but the simple truth? The young girl, gifted with a staunch faith, had grown up to disappoint. Her wings failed her in her first awkward sally into a degraded world. She who should have flown sank instead. Nothing very strange here, you say. This is the self-same story of every human soul. Only one daughter of Eve walked with clean, pure feet on the earth. Only one woman had nothing to shake off her soles when she took wing. But that seedy crow in the corner speaks of the darkest things. There's something blacker in its wings than the ink of space, gloomier than the moldy coat of a Dickensian undertaker. The prophet reviled King David, but what is it to my sin, the theft of a poor man's only sheep? David sinned for beauty at least, and the life he took was only that of a comrade in arms, not that of his own hidden child. My prophet bird croaks, accusing of pointless, shallow sins born of ennui. There was no overpowering burst, no pulsing love that ravished me into wickedness. I sold a high birthright for a mess of porridge, sticky and insipid at that. I'm not alone, I know. Beside me march legions of men and women. I hear their own dark crows sometimes cawing in the space behind their eyes, in cocktail parties, or earnestly and sadly on the internet. The world goes on its brutal way, saying that what we hear is nothing but the clanging chains of scrupulosity, the iron drag of dusty traditions. The world is wrong. We of the black birds know it. For years now, I've failed to chase my tormentor away from the shadowy places in which he lurks. But lately I've had grace-born glimmers of an entirely different hope. I'm starting to think that I am meant to keep him close, and that the Splendid One has a plan for both of us. I'm beginning to believe, really believe, that he means to turn my dark prophet into a glorious thing, a shining singer of songs of joy. Not the messenger of doom, but the herald of my transformed self. Sorrowing, yes, but willing to think myself worthy of the promises of Christ. Willing to be bathed by him, made clean and new. Lord, help me let you. Let me let you. And now, Father Roger Landry offers us, as is customary, a short and inspiring homily to prepare us for this Sunday's Gospel.
This is Father Roger Landry, and it's a joy for me to be with you as we enter into the consequential conversation the risen Lord Jesus wants to have with each of us this Sunday. When he's going to say to us, as he said to the first apostles, "Come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while." I'm recording this in Indianapolis, where I'm participating in the National Eucharistic Congress, the first in 83 years. With a population of 924,000, buttressed by the 50,000 Catholics from across the United States who have come here for the Congress, Indianapolis is far from a deserted place. But the same Jesus who summoned the apostles away from their work, their ordinary lives, their hangouts, and at least many of their friends, has summoned us here to be with him, present for us in the Blessed Sacrament. In fact, Jesus regularly summons us to come to be with him, to find our rest in and with him, to refresh and remake us as he yokes ourselves to himself. He seeks to do this each Sunday, indeed each day at Mass. He seeks to do this in the heart-to-heart conversation apart from the daily hustle and bustle we call prayer, and especially in the summit of personal prayer, that's Eucharistic adoration. So I'd urge you to enter the gospel scene this Sunday with these Eucharistic lenses. Jesus continues to actualize what he did in this Sunday's gospel, drawing us from the Eucharist to be with him, to be restored by him, so that he can send us out to help others find in him what we do. So let's return to the scene. After the hard work of the apostles' missionary journeys, Jesus could see they were tired. As St. Mark tells us, people were coming and going in such great numbers that they didn't have the opportunity even to eat. So Jesus brought them off with him in a boat to a deserted place. We know that the rhythm of human life involves not just work, but rest, just as God in the Genesis account rested on the seventh day. Such rest is essential, not just to recharge, but to refocus with God on the meaning of what we've done and are doing, on the gift of our life and how we're going to invest it. Jesus took the apostles away, not just to give the apostles a break, but to review with them all that they had experienced on their apostolic journeys. In a similar way, Jesus regularly seeks in different ways to draw us away from the daily grind, from the sometimes frenetic pace of human life, from television and gadget screens, so that he might similarly refresh us, helping us to review with the grace of his light what we have been experiencing in the various aspects of our life. It's an opportunity for him to help us press the reset button on our existence, to strengthen us in whatever struggles we face, to move us to thank God the Father for his blessings, to help us to see things more clearly, and to reprioritize according to what's truly important. Over the course of the last 2 months, as I've served as the chaplain to the Eastern or Seton route of the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage, which my young pilgrims and I had the privilege to carry Jesus from New Haven, Connecticut here to Indianapolis, we often had many different powerful events each day. Huge masses, long Eucharistic processions, preaching several times a day or giving witness talks to crowds in schools, holy hours and long periods of adoration in churches, and even when we had to drive lengthy distances in our specially outfit pilgrimage van, which was a mobile adoration chapel. The whole thing was rather exhausting, and some days we too found it difficult to have time even to eat. Over the course of our journey, we needed to slow down a few times for days of recollection, to process things with the Lord Jesus, to appreciate what he had been doing in and through us, and to experience the revival he was seeking to give us and through us spark in the whole church. Jesus seeks to give us that renewal first each day in daily prayer. He wants us to come away with him to the state of the desert without distractions, to converse with him. This Sunday is an opportunity for us to speak to Jesus honestly about how faithful and grateful we are in responding to that daily summons. Do we prioritize or resist it? Jesus also seeks to give us a new start every Christian Sabbath, every Sunday, in which out of love, the Church even makes this invitation a command. When the Lord gave the third commandment, he told us the reason why, something that at first might seem like a non sequitur. Remember that you were once slaves in the land of Egypt. This is why the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. If we're not keeping the Sabbath, in other words, we're becoming slaves again, slaves to work or what work can help us to obtain, slaves to the errands we try to get done on the weekends, slaves to entertainment, to sports or other activities. Jesus wants us to come away with him on Sunday so that he can renew us and help us properly put God at the center of our week, time, and life. He wants us filled with his love to use the Sabbath, to love God back, and to love those he has made our neighbors, most especially family members and friends. If we desire to remain spiritually fit and serene on the pilgrimage of life, how important it is for us truly to live Sunday as a day of the Lord. But the Church has often used these words of Jesus, "Come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while," to highlight the importance of taking extended time away with the Lord for him to refresh us, particularly with monthly days of recollection and annual retreats. A day of recollection is at least a period of a few hours, but depending upon the circumstance and availability, can extend to a half or full day of consecutive prayer, normally in the presence or around the Eucharistic Lord Jesus. It can be done at any time of the week. Some are able to dedicate one night a month. Others will carve out time on a given Saturday or Sunday. Many priests, whose nights and weekends are the fullest parts of their pastoral schedule, make time on a weekday afternoon. There are organized days of recollection at retreat centers or by various ecclesiastical movements in parishes and shrines. But someone with self-discipline can also freely do one on one's own. A day of recollection is a regularly scheduled time, normally once a month, to go more deeply with the Lord Jesus into our relationship with Him, to review the larger trends of our life, to get His light for the various decisions we need to make, and to ask His help for the situations in our life that are weighing on us, and to make resolutions to depend on Him more. That's what my fellow pilgrims and I were doing every few weeks along our Eucharistic journey. An annual retreat is a more extended time of prayer, together anew with the risen Lord in the Holy Eucharist, in which we're able, in God's presence, and ordinarily with the help of a retreat director, offering various meditations or one-on-one guidance, to give God our full attention for a lengthier period of time, so that in addition to all the fruits of a day of recollection, we can review with Him the previous year and receive His light and encouragement to make resolutions for the upcoming one. Traditionally, most retreats last about a week, which, depending upon the format, can be 5 to 8 days. For those for whom that would be too difficult, it's possible to do one from Friday night through Sunday. For those with more time, and especially for those making or weighing big transitions, they can make a retreat of 30 days, or even like Jesus, 40. Retreats are normally done in retreat centers away from daily distractions, but they can also be done in parish churches, as some new movements in the church are doing effectively. The key is to respond to the Lord's summons and make the time each month for a day of recollection and each year for a retreat. Many people are phobic of that much silent time alone with the Eucharistic Lord. We say our lives are too complicated and busy. We nevertheless, however, find time miraculously each month for dinner engagement, our favorite television programs, or going to a child's or grandchild's baseball games or plays. Somehow, most of us also find time each year to spend various weekends, whole weeks, or even longer for various forms of vacation. There's nothing wrong, of course, with any of those activities, but they show that we do have more time that we could respond to Jesus' invitation than many of us admit. Retreats and days of recollection can therefore be a practical test of how we're genuinely prioritizing God, the things of God, and the good of our soul. Even the busiest of us have some time, but we often spend it on less important things than God. We may have to arrange a babysitter for our kids, a caregiver for our elderly parents, a dog sitter, a cat sitter for our pets. But if we're able to do it for other activities, we can do it too for God, and it's so worth it. Several years ago, Pope Francis spoke about the fruits that come from recollections and retreats, and the hope that more of the faithful would take advantage. The person who goes away with the Lord in this way, he said, experiences the attraction, the fascination of God, and returns renewed, transfigured to ordinary life, to service, to daily relations, bearing within him the perfume of Christ. The Holy Father added, the men and women of today need to encounter God. Retreats offer space and time for intense listening to His Word in silence and in prayer, and contribute to renewing one who participates in them in unconditional adherence to Christ, helping him to understand that prayer is the irreplaceable means of union with Jesus crucified. Summer, when most of us have some time off, is often a very good time to make an annual retreat. As we prepare for Mass this Sunday, let's get ready to hear Jesus from Peter's boat say, come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while, and to be prepared to respond generously and faithfully, each day in daily prayer and daily Mass if possible, each week in a holy hour of Eucharistic adoration, each Sunday by keeping holy the Sabbath, and with Jesus' help each month with a recollection, and each year with a retreat. Those who take Jesus up on this personal invitation, like the apostles, will never regret it. And Jesus renews that invitation this Sunday to us from the altar. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Father Landry. To hear more of Father Landry's homilies, please visit catholicpreaching.com. And to follow him on the Eucharistic pilgrimage route dedicated to St. Elizabeth Seton, please visit setonpilgrimage.org. And with that, we leave you for our prayers for a wonderful week for you and your families.